Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Jordan, Samir Al Rifa'i, speak with us today. Prime Minister Al Rifa'i has spent several decades in the public eye, and we are privileged to receive his first-hand insight into the intricacies of Jordanian politics. He was the 38th Prime Minister of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, serving from 2009 to 2011. Prime Minister Al Rifa'i pursued his bachelor's at Harvard, majoring in Middle Eastern studies, and went on to complete his master's at the University of Cambridge in international relations. Thereafter, he began his career in the public service by joining the Royal Hashemite Court as private secretary, where he held prestigious positions as advisor to the king, minister, and Secretary General of the Royal Court. Prime Minister Al Rifa'i has also had a stellar career outside of government, founding private equity investment firm Jordan Dubai Capital, and serving as the head of numerous critical Jordanian infrastructure committees. During his term as Prime Minister, in line with his administration's 7-point program, he implemented vast structural reforms to broaden Jordan's economic landscape, increase voter turnout, and introduce checks and balances on government. The former Prime Minister pioneered programs to uproot corruption and promote transparency across all levels of government. He instituted a Ministerial Code of Conduct and encouraged widespread reporting, thus providing citizens a crucial avenue to highlight corruption. The Prime Minister continues to advance policy reforms as the Vice President of the Senate of Jordan. And for his dedication in serving the Kingdom of Jordan, Prime Minister Al Rifa'i was awarded the prestigious Order of the Renaissance. Please welcome our esteemed guest, Prime Minister Samir Al Rifa'i.
Thank you so much. Thank you, very kind. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. First of all, this is my first visit to Warwick University, and I thought Cambridge University was a beautiful one with great students, and I hope to be here many times in the future. And it's a great honor and pleasure to be invited to Warwick Economics Summit 2023. I'd like to start by thanking everyone involved in organizing this event and for the opportunity to speak to this wonderful group of individuals who are both here in person and virtually. I must admit, I'm always filled with a burst of optimism and trepidation when I speak to motivated young leaders. Your motivation and determination and honesty makes us want to reshape the world to a better place. And I think the time has come where you should do that instead of us. This event is not a showcase of prominent dignitaries from around the world. Rather, it is a gathering of minds of all ages to forge new paths towards peace, prosperity, and a better world. And had it not been for the amazing, again, youth in organizing this summit, which shows the deep values that you have, we would not be here. And in preparing for this occasion and reflecting on the youth of the MENA region, I found myself returning repeatedly to two questions. Firstly, what is required to move our region forward, given the aspirations and expectations of more than 100 million young Arabs aged between 15 and 29? Secondly, how might the world, especially countries that believe in democracy, human rights, the rule of law, take action to help create the future that is both prosperous, more stable in our region, and thus in the world? Before we ponder possible answers to these questions, let's first consider a few facts about the region I call home and proudly represent. Arab countries never knew the Western model of democracy. Not to say our lives are incongruent to this model, but we did not go through an industrial revolution, a Magna Carta, a Declaration of Independence. And though Islam, like Christianity and other religions, are not at odds with democracy, we have yet to remove the gray areas between church and state. Our region was occupied for 500 years, from the Ottoman Empire, and after its collapse, the colonial powers divided the region for another 50 years. And when this colonialism ended, we found that what was once a vast state became many smaller ones due to agreements such as Sykes-Picot, San Remo, and the Treaty of Lausanne. And now, ironically, we Arabs fight to defend these artificial borders. The Arab dream of a unified Arab state ended. A rich tapestry of identities united to fight for its rights faded, and every piece of this torn fabric became preoccupied with itself and preserving its existence and interest. States with deep pockets and those who found themselves with wealth and natural resources spent on their people but distanced them from politics. Other countries tried to adopt democracy and sought to elect their leaders, but those who came to power remained there. In other countries, there were revolutions and military coups. However, I'm proud to say that Jordan, despite all the odds, has maintained a steady course of modernization, moderation, and evolution. Jordan is a very small country with very limited resources, even where water barely exists. Unfortunately, we are the second water poorest country in the world. Nevertheless, despite all these odds, we have maintained our stability for the last 100 years. Jordan has always believed in the true values of democracy and is a close ally of the West. We have had an elected parliament since 1929. Women were given the right to vote before some European countries. And we had a parliamentary government in 1956. But sadly, this did not last long due to the turbulence of the region, which always, unfortunately, we have to pay the price for. After that, Jordan lost half its territories in the 1967 war. Then came the 1973 war, and the region's crisis has continued non-stop. His Majesty, King Abdullah II, assumed the throne in 1999, 22 years ago, after the death of his father, the late King Hussein. May his soul rest in eternal peace. And the years of his rule were not easier than those of His late Majesty, as well as the years of Jordan's creation in 1921. As it witnessed in the last 22 years, the Aqsa al-Intifada in the year 2000, the 9/11 attacks in 2001, the subsequent war on terror then, the occupation of Iraq in 2003, the war on Al-Qaeda, and our 9/11, which witnessed the bombings of Amman in 2005. The global economic crisis followed in 2007, the rise of then the Arab Spring and its consequences in 2011, the rise of ISIS 2014, the Yemen War 2015, the direct and indirect conflicts between countries in our region that continue till today, the corona pandemic, and lastly, the Russian-Ukrainian war. Despite all of the above, Jordan did not use these as an excuse to reverse its direction. It remained unwavering, determined to fight for what is right. And in order to maintain this, His Majesty believed that we must adopt a well-established institutional democracy, which is what he sought to accomplish throughout the last 22 years, through many initiatives. Unfortunately, most of these initiatives suffered not from the content, but from insufficient members, poor representation, whether on the political, intellectual, and social side, and the results that they presented were general frameworks, some of which needed much development before being applied or codified. Yet these steps laid a solid foundation for larger reforms that would empower individual rights and electoral legitimacy. In 2021, we had the opportunity to build on this foundation. The Royal Committee to Modernize the Political System was formed by royal decree, and I had the honor of and working to overcome and learning from previous mistakes. The committee comprised 92 members, including a diverse set of individuals from across the political ideological spectrum, from academics, civil society, and the entire gamut of political representation from the far left to the far right, including Islamists. There was a significant representation of youth and of women. And His Majesty, in his letter forming the committee, guaranteed that the government would endorse the outcomes of this committee and refer them to Parliament without amendments, without him knowing what they were going to be. The committee finalized its work in 4 months successfully, producing a political parties law, an election law, progressive constitutional amendments, including women and youth empowerment, and recommendations on decentralization. Another thing His Majesty wanted was that nothing be voted on and everything be agreed to unanimously. So you can imagine what that meant to me when you have the ultra-right and ultra-left in many spectrums, and you had to get unanimity between everything, but it happened. And today, these are the laws of the land, and the constitution has been changed. The key test today is whether our citizens and parties, and we've had parties for many decades, but not political parties that have programs. They're parties as parties, so the party law changed that completely. And today we hope that every party will stand for certain issues and address the many discrepancies that we have. Because a third issue that His Majesty wanted was that this Parliament, we were hoping that we'd reach, in 2 years' time, we'd have 30 of seats go to political parties only, and then see how things went. And His Majesty's response to me was, if you start with 30 and don't put a plan, it will be 31st and 30 last. So today, in 2 years' time, it's going to be 30%. The next time, it's going to be 50%. And the last time, it's going to be 65% as a minimum guaranteed seats for political parties in our parliament. This insistence on reform, despite that the region and its countries have a very different approach, is a challenge. And another challenge is the harsh economic conditions that don't make political development a priority for its citizens and give way to populism, anger at the ballot box. The question is, how does a small country with very limited resources, but still believes in the values of justice, equality, democracy, and the rule of law, and wants to establish a model in the midst of a troubled region, achieve this at a time that the region is in turmoil, the economic conditions in the country are bad, and most of what we are doing is frowned upon by many countries in our region. Secondly, have we received from our friends and allies the support that we need? The answer is we have received support. Is the support sufficient? Unfortunately, it is not. This leads us to another question. Is the Western world interested in stability and democracy in the Middle East, or just in the Northern Hemisphere, or in Europe, or the United States? Despite our demographic gift of youth, according to the latest UN survey released in 2022, the Arab region registered a 12% unemployment rate, the highest in the world. The biggest tragedy is perhaps the fact that according to the International Labour Organization statistics, unemployment rates are highest for new entrants into the labor market at 24.8%. The number of youth unemployment in Jordan is over 40%. And we have yet to see the deep effects on youth that have only seen death, destruction, and have become refugees in the last decade in war-torn countries. If our citizens are not productively engaged in our economy, they will not be productive participants in our society, including the democratic process. And we will find that they will morph into ticking time bombs of despair, anger, and frustration. I want to give an example here. When the committee was established, and 4 months later, we polled the enthusiasm of people to what is happening. Between the age of 18 and 24, there was a 66% approval rating to what we were doing. 25 to 28, it dropped from 66% to 30%. And that is because of the poor economic conditions and the sense of despair that they have not been able to find jobs to make ends meet. Jordan, despite all of this, has received large waves of refugees. We have opened our doors to Palestinian refugees in 48 and 67, Syrians, Lebanese, Iraqis, and Jordan today hosts 53 nationalities as refugees, including Europeans. According to statistics, there are 3.7 million refugees residing in Jordan. while our population is 7.5 million, i.e., that 1 out of every 3 people in Jordan holds refugee status. Imagine for a moment, in any one of your countries, if 1 out of every 3 people were refugees. What would that mean regarding your country's political, social, and economic challenges? Imagine for a moment when a classroom has 20 students and overnight they become 80 students in one classroom because we are treating the refugees as we treat our population. And Jordan has been paying this bill silently on behalf of the world since 1926. We receive aid that has not exceeded $2 billion a year at its peak, while the cost of feeding refugees in one camp, Zaatri, has reached $14 million a day. And we have 3 Syrian refugee camps. The international funding for the response plan to the Syrian crisis covered 21% of the total needs. The world united for a few years. It was the flavor of the month, and then moved on to different priorities. What we've seen over the last week of support to Turkey, to Syria, regardless of politics, is something that gives a glimmer of hope that we can look at things positively and support countries that are in crisis without looking at the political ramifications or how we feel about a certain country. I hope that this is a new path rather than just another response to another crisis, and then we move on to the next issue. Today, Jordanians see hundreds of billions of dollars going to the Ukraine, opening all doors to the Ukrainian refugees, and can't help but wonder, is there a price tag on human life? Do the values of democracy, human rights change because a country is further away or belongs to a different continent? Not to detract from those atrocities happening in the Ukraine at this unfortunate time, but the question is, and we all support the principled decision that any acquisition of territory by force is illegal in international law. And what happened and the swift response is something to be respected. But the question is, why hasn't it happened in Palestine for the last 50 years? And this is what our citizens feel. Are we today citizens of a global village, or are we just citizens that don't belong to the rest of the world? And today, and sadly, if you look at what's going on in the world, an iron curtain is being moved eastwards, and countries that feel a certain way are moving in that direction, and we have to be careful about how the world will look in the future. Don't we owe nascent democracies a chance to thrive and show its neighbors and the world that the grass is greener on the other side? Rather than the comparison that is being asked every day, that other powers protect their friends more than the West does its friends in the region. This has become the talk of the average citizen in many countries of the world. With all this that I've said, Imagine that international evidence suggests that even under the most optimal macro conditions, including steady economic growth and the absence of internal or regional conflict, embarking on structural reforms to build a modern state and a competitive economy is best a 10-year endeavor. Those favorable macro conditions clearly do not exist in our region today, nor do we have the sort of safety nets and supports in place that were provided to Eastern Europe by the West after the collapse of communism. The solution to the problem of Jordan and ensuring the survival of what we are trying to do and this model of democracy in the region requires a Marshall Plan and must be supported by countries that believe in these values, and not all countries do. Admittedly, the majority of our government's annual budget is spent on salaries, pensions, and subsidies, leaving precious little for growth promoting projects and programs. And this has to change in short order, because before asking for help from others, we need to help ourselves. Thus, in parallel to the political reform process, an economic and public sector reform plan were implemented, and hopefully they will right-size government and they will create 1 million jobs over the next decade. But this again needs international support in order for our youth to have a chance and to send positive, to remove that statistic of losing hope at 24 years old. And hopefully, with the business environment optimized, the political process in place, and bureaucracy ending, we will be able to be a shining example of what can be done in our part of the world. The sad part is when one compares European countries, which differ from each other in language and culture and have had a long history of wars, have become an example of unity and a beacon for human rights today in the world. Let's forget about Brexit. And certainly means, hopefully, that the Arabs, with their common history and civilization, are capable of doing the same if they had the same opportunities. Simply put, we deserve better than we have today. And what Jordan has embarked on reflects what its citizens deserve. And sadly, because this path does not please everyone, support from countries that believe in these values are essential. I know that this ask from countries that are going through tough at times on the economy, whether Europe or the United States, understand the pressure on governments by its citizens regarding help to countries far away. But again, I must stress that there is no country far away today. And history has shown us throughout the last century that the hardships Europe and the US and other countries endured could have been avoided had politicians not turned a blind eye and thought what happens in a certain place will not affect them today, tomorrow, or in a year's time. As I end, may I give just a few words of advice to you who are the new leaders and deserve a better world than you are living in today and that you did not shape. You must shape this future for yourself and your children, and you must see the world as we have failed to do. You must support and be involved not only in local issues, but international ones that speak to your values. You need to speak out, you need to lead, and you need to do a better job than we have. And as I end, if I may just thank you for giving me the honor and pleasure of being with you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister Al Rifa'i, for your enlightening talk on the dynamic political climate in Jordan. I'd like to thank you for bringing us along on your journey, giving us an insider perspective into policymaking within the Kingdom of Jordan. And more so, I'd like to add, Mr. Prime Minister, on your evocative speech for the need for global cooperation in light of the recent earthquake in Syria and Turkey, an issue which we should all ponder and try to contribute to.
Thank you very much.
And with that,
I'm ready to get grilled.
Let us proceed on to our Q&A session.
All right.
As I'm sure, and I can see, many are eager to ask questions. The person at the front, can we get a mic to him, please?
Hi, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us here today. I have a question related to the hosting of refugee population in Jordan with such limited means. How does a country from the Middle East, how is it able to host this population and integrate them into its society? Because a great part of Jordan, of sexual population, is descended from these Palestinians that came in the country in the 60s and 70s. How does your country, how does the Kingdom of Jordan manage to do that?
With great difficulty, but the belief that this is the right thing to do. Just again to repeat, we're the second poorest country in terms of water. Imagine the second poorest country receiving 3.7 million refugees that were unplanned for. What does it do to your infrastructure, your classrooms, your hospitals, all of the costs that are incurred? From 1921 until 2011, when I left government, the debt was $15 billion. $15 billion over 90 years. Today, in the last 10 years, it's gone up from $15 billion to $50 billion. An increase of 35 billion, i.e., we accrued 250 years of debt in 10 years. And that is because of the region. And sadly, when you look at the region, and today it's very easy to say, I'm going to sanction this country, I'm going to sanction that country, you can't deal with this country, all our neighbors. And the question is, okay, what are we going to do with the 2 million refugees that are Syrian? We have to find a solution for them. We can't keep black holes in the region that sooner or later will suck the countries around them into it. Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Libya. All of these countries are black holes today. And we can't just ignore them and say we don't deal with them, there is no solution. Because if we continue to do that, there are powers today, whether it's China or Russia, that countries will will go towards only because the West doesn't want to help or doesn't want to allow other countries to deal with certain countries. So there are principles, And there are things that are acceptable and unacceptable, and there are pros and cons that I believe countries that have done nothing wrong should not be paying the price for being in a certain neighborhood.
Right, right. I believe that definitely does clarify your question.
Does it? Does it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think this actually leads quite well into our next question, which is from our Airmeet platform.
Yeah.
I believe that this is in reference to Jordan's open citizenship policy for Palestinians. And I'll read out the question, Mr. Prime Minister. It is regarding the large number of refugees coming to Jordan, is there any economic rationale for this? For example, increasing the productive capacity of your economy?
No. The reason that the refugees are in Jordan is not because of a decision that Jordan has taken to bring them in. It is in response to them suffering in their countries and allowing them in because it's the right thing to do. But the cost has been huge. And we hope the Palestinian issue will be solved in order for the refugees to go back, or at least the region to stabilize, the Syrians to go back to their countries, the Iraqis, the Yemenis. We have 53 nationalities of refugees. So it's not we have very limited resources, i.e. very limited jobs. So the jobs that we have should be jobs that go to Jordanians. Hopefully we'll have the luxury in the future to have more people from different nationalities come and work in the jobs, but that needs the economy to move, and that needs the region to stabilize.
Right. Yep. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that was an aspect that I'm sure many people were wondering about, because you mentioned that the issue of having a classroom where how does a teacher manage that? And I think it does come with that difficulty of putting the country's values above the economic impact.
Yeah.
And yes, a question from the person 4 rows from the front.
Morning. I know it's not an Arab country, but I'm curious to hear how you view the current uprisings in Iran against the Islamic Republic in terms of how either their success or failure might change or alter the power dynamics in the Middle East, and also what you consider should be the response of the international community and liberal democracies.
I think getting involved in the internal issues of states is not the right thing to do. We've seen what happens when one does that, whether in Afghanistan or Iraq. So what seems like the right thing to do has to be studied in terms of what the effects are long term. Having said that, the uprisings are a clear indication that a large part of the population are unhappy with what's going on. And as one says that other countries shouldn't be involved in the affairs of others, Iran should not be involved in the affairs of other countries as well. And when you become involved in the affairs of others, you expect a response to that as well. But any regime that is willing to shed blood of its people will be much more difficult to remove than a regime that doesn't. So I hope within the context of our region, because Iran is a player, whether in Iraq or Syria or Lebanon or Yemen, that there is a solution to that. And there are times where a zero-sum game is not realistic. It's how do you find ways to agree to things that are acceptable to all countries and to the country itself. And if that doesn't happen, then there are United Nations Security Council resolutions, to do the thing in the proper way, and make any country that is outside of that realm understand the seriousness of a UN resolution or a Security Council resolution. And again, if we take Security Council Resolution 242 as an example, which was the resolution of the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war in 1967, it still is just a resolution. It doesn't bode well for taking Security Council resolution seriously.
Right. Could we get a mic to the person at the front, please? At the very front, all the way at the front. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for a very dignified talk, and many thanks for helping at least myself to understand a little bit more about the importance of Jordan and the work that it's doing with refugees. Historically, people have viewed people arriving into a country, foreigners, immigrants, and refugees, as a problem, as a liability. There is a newer view, which is to see people who arrive into a country as actually a resource. And if you look at the UK economy, there's a lot of evidence that it's the immigrants that are the entrepreneurial class, and often a resource from which the UK will increasingly rely to be the engine of economic growth. My father, who the first lecture today was in memory of him, took a view that the central point of economics was to help people transform themselves from being a problem to being a solution. So is there something that Jordan could do more to see the refugees as a resource, given you said that it's an economy with few natural resources, and therefore people will be the key resource?
May I answer it in two parts? One is the Palestinian refugees. The issue of Palestine must be resolved, and a two-state solution must be the final outcome. And then these refugees can decide whether they want to go back or do they want to stay in the country as non-citizens. Syrian refugees, the issue of Syria must be solved, because it makes no sense that 5 million Syrians, 3 million in Turkey and 2 million in Jordan, don't have a choice of going back to their countries. But I definitely believe that any talented pool of individuals, whether refugees or workers from the outside, are definitely a good thing if the economy is large enough to absorb them. Today, we're not. And today, if someone takes a job, he's taking it from Jordan. And this is why I've been saying that to do this, we do need something like a Marshall Plan. To say, Jordan, $35 billion of debt over the last 10 years versus 15 over the last 90. Doesn't the world see that we're paying the price of decisions that are not ours? And create and say, we believe that this is a country that has all the ingredients and the desire and the will to become a beacon of hope of what should become the norm in the Middle East. Without saying names, but I visited someone when I was Prime Minister, and we're talking about a project that involved Europeans and Americans. And the person responded to me, he said, Samir, your king is a direct descendant of the Prophet, so he has more Islamic credentials than anyone. You have a peace treaty with Israel. You are closer to the West than any country could be. You're a partner on the war on terrorism. You're modernizing and democratizing and evolving. And yet when we look at you, the grass is not greener. So let's stay with our friends and you keep your friends. So in order for us to be able to do what you're saying, we do need a plan of how to create the right ingredients for Jordan to thrive. And then it will be able to absorb many talented people. Because today, even if you have talented people, there's nothing to do. And most of our, unfortunately, the government money is going to salaries, pensions, and this has to be fixed. And a very low amount goes to projects and infrastructure. And countries in the region are very absorbed with their own plans of how to develop and are not looking at other countries. And what we're doing is a different path than many of them are doing. So this is why I'm saying that I think we should forget about regions, continents, and look at values and support these values.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're not quite done yet. We have one last question. And I think this neatly segues from our previous discussion, Mr. Prime Minister. You mentioned the Marshall Plan. And the next question is on the role of international aid.
Yeah.
Do you believe that the West has a genuine interest in the Middle East?
It has a genuine interest in the Middle East. The question is, what is that interest?
Right, yeah.
Is it natural resources, or is it values, or democracy, or human rights? We hope that it is the latter, not only the first. And we hope that this is translated not into just, well done, you've done a great job, because this is, and we're not doing it because we don't believe in it, but we think it's good to do it and sell it abroad. No, this is done because a country that has allowed 3.7 million refugees into the country does the right thing, regardless of what the pros are and the cons. And what His Majesty wanted the second centennial, which our second centennial was in 2021, to be about how do we modernize the political, economic, and bureaucracy in order to make Jordan a shining beacon. But this needs support. Again, 1.7 billion that we get is the maintenance of one aircraft carrier without the weapons for a year. So, I mean, one has to look at this and think, is doing the right thing and helping important? And is it as important as a maintenance of an aircraft carrier? And where we hope that one day we will not need any of these weapons. But it's going to take a long time. But there's hope. I mean, when Europe rallied in the world to support the Ukraine, because it believed that this was the right thing to do, there is a very clear discrepancy between what it did there, which is the correct thing to do, and speaks to the interest and the values that Europe and the United States have, and versus the open wounds in our region that haven't been dealt with. And Jordan, again, appreciates very, very much the support that it gets from Europe and the United States. But it's a drop in the ocean of what we need to implement these deep structural reforms that will change the Middle East when Jordan becomes a country that one looks at and says, I want to be exactly like this.
So articulately put by the Prime Minister. And I think that was truly a wonderful session. We've had a great discussion.
Thank you.
And I thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Prime
you very
Minister,
much.
for your time
It was
as well.
wonderful being with you. Thank you so much. It was an honor being with you, and good luck. And the fact that this is the 23rd time we're 22nd speaks to 22 years of individuals and young leaders wanting to make a change. So I hope that you do a much better job than we've done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime
Thank
Minister.
you.